Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. We've got a lot of things to pick from, and I hope you don't regret this huge decision you've made to watch Jen and I talk about story maps today. So we'll do our best to give you tips and tricks and kind of go over a couple of different story map templates that are available to you, and how you can best leverage those to tell your stories and make your maps come to life and really make them sing. So thanks again for coming, and really appreciate it. Do you want to go first?
Oh, good. I'll switch you over.
Actually, why don't you go first, and I'll load mine up.
Okay. All right, so John and I created Cascade story maps for our introduction. So hi, I'm John, hi, I'm Jen. And a little background about me is my dad is from southern Louisiana, and he explored the world and ended up in Saudi Arabia and took a vacation to Thailand and met my mom, where they got married and moved back to Saudi Arabia, and then decided to move to the States to Atlanta, Georgia. And I got my bachelor's and then my master's degree in geography at the University of Georgia, and then moved to California to work for Esri. And working with the Earth, a lot of my jobs have been mostly with GIS from local government, federal government, private industries, nonprofits, education, and moved to Esri about 3 years ago. And at Esri, I like making maps and story maps that hopefully make a difference, either through mobile apps or creating videos. I write a lot of blogs, and I work a lot with smart mapping, and I'm a product engineer, so I work with the developers, but I also work with the users, so I speak kind of both languages. And have a dog I got 2 months ago I wanted to share with you. This is Opal.
Oh.
She's 12 years old, and she's deaf, so she knows sign language.
Does she really?
Well, she doesn't know how to do it, but she can understand how to do it.
Oh, okay. That's helpful. That's good clarification.
All right, take it away.
Thank you. One. Yeah. Hi, I'm John. And yeah, like Jen said, we made Cascades to introduce ourselves because it's such a versatile framework. Cascade story mapping. Here are some maps that I make. I work for Esri too with Jen. Here are my mom and my dad, Bert and Chris Nelson. They were both geography teachers, and my mom was also an art teacher. So it kind of makes sense to me a little bit. Here's my siblings growing up, goofing around. There's 4 of us. I grew up right in the middle of Michigan, Mount Pleasant, Michigan. I also went to school there. It's where I met my wife, Danielle, in a ceramics class. I worked for a time in Massachusetts on the island of Martha's Vineyard for the Wampanoag tribe in their natural resources department. It's where my son was born. It's a beautiful place. Came back to Michigan, of course, because it's the best state. And I got a great job in Michigan, and I took some courses at Michigan State University in the PhD program. Life is good. Here's Danielle and I when we're younger punks. Now we're just not quite as young punks. Here's my kids. We live in a little blue farmhouse in Michigan, and I work in that wooden shed right there. That's where I do my stuff. With 5 kids, you need a place to go that has a door, ideally separated, by open space. And I love maps. And thanks for coming.
Okay.
So, story maps. Why? Esri, of course, is a mapping company and a mapping software company. And we always had these amazing tools that gave you great capabilities to make analysis and derive insights, and these layout tools that could let you just create these beautiful cartographic products. And then we were like, okay, good, go do your thing. Get out of here. Take your maps and leave. Right? And so some years ago, Alan Carroll, who was the chief cartographer at National Geographic, came to Esri and said, I've got this totally great idea. You kind of drop folks off at the curb when it comes to actually communicating the power of maps. How about we help them out? And so he headed up the team of story mappers, right? So we build software that's all web-based, and it's open source, by the way, so you can download the source code and make changes to it if you like. You know, we're very dedicated to the open source community and that philosophy. And what story maps do is help you take your maps and really broadcast that and communicate that and share the results of your good geographic work with your teams, with the general public, with your family. And what it does is just lets you take this map and really unfold a geographic phenomenon instead of just relying on PowerPoint, you know, for example, or a bunch of images or a zip file or email or a slide projector, right? You can actually create something that's living and breathing, and we'll host it for you if you like, and you can share that publicly. So that's what story maps are, and that's why story maps are. Okay, reach.
All right, so we're going to show you 3 demos today. One on how to make a map journal, how to map series, and how to cascade. So I'll do the map journal and the map series, and if you'd like, you can do the cascade.
I'd like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So when I started a few years ago at Esri, the map journal was the coolest thing ever until the cascade came along. I still like map journal, and it's still really effective. Here's one that I made when I first started. It's on global poverty. And I'll just go through it and give you tips and tricks on how to improve your map journals. And so I like to tell people to don't start with the map. Start with an interesting quote, or start with a really captivating image or video or GIF. And also another thing is to minimize the amount of text that you have. Some people want to put a whole book in the intro. Maybe put a few sentences, put a nice quote at the end, credit the photo. And then in the map journal, there are lots of media that you can include. So you can include hyperlinks to let people explore more if they want. You can also embed images that can expand. And actually, I'll go into edit mode so that you guys can see what it's really like to build one of these things. So this is the interface. There's the edit button, and there's the main stage, which is the image on the left, or the map on the left, and the side panel, which is the text on the right. And in the side panel, you can edit your text, you can create story actions, which I'll show you later, which is really interesting, add images, you can even look at the HTML of the source, which I'll show later as well. And then with the main stage, you can add a map, you can add an image, a video, or a web page. So I'll take you through the story map a little bit slower than your last session. So it's not as much of a lightning talk. So here's the first map that we see. Notice that it took 3 tabs, 3 sections to finally get to the map. So the story isn't always about the map. The map is used as a tool, as a supplement, just like you would use images and charts and videos. And something that John and I like to do is, instead of having a legend and people have to look at it and try to understand it, include the legend as your text. So notice how I wrote lighter, brighter purples, and I colored it a light, bright purple. So it saves people time. You know, red means health, blue means education, green means living standards. And so I go through each of those individually, and then you can also embed websites. So I'll go on to the next one, green infrastructure for the GIS professional. This is a project I worked on last year, and it's really neat that you can include a GIF in the beginning. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you would upload an image and click on the link and paste your GIF, your hosted GIF, in the map journal. Now if you do, let's see, right now it's set as fit. So let's try fill. Alright. There's stretch. Okay, I already edited the HTML on this. So this is, have you ever noticed when you did a map journal, it looks something like this, where there's the gray panel on the side? There's a way to change that. So the map journal developer added a HTML code that you can add to this to change the color of that gray area. So raise of hands for people who've made map journals. Have you ever noticed this gray? Okay, so this will apply to you guys immediately.
You feel stuck with it, right? I don't want that color of gray. So.
Yeah. And so for this GIF, when I added it, it had that gray bar on the top and the bottom. And so I used my color pick eyedropper. It's a Chrome extension, and there's lots of them. And I found the HTML of the exact color of the background of my GIF, which is 333333. And then I went into the HTML source in the edit section and added this text that I'm highlighting here. And this will be available for all of you guys after the session. We'll put it in the PowerPoint so that you can, it'll link to these stories that we're showing. So no need to copy all of this down. But pretty much you put the HTML code in here. So if I put a different one, it should change the color if it was a larger screen. So the screen is small enough where it's not showing the gray. That's the gist of it. All right, so those two were the two map journal examples I wanted to show, how to add your media, your maps. Another thing I'd like to show is the settings. So you're not stuck with having a side panel that's immediately to the side. You can have a floating panel. And what's nice about these is that it immediately changes. Once you change the setting, you can immediately change it, see it in your story map. And then it doesn't have to be on the right side. You could also put it on the left. And then you can change the size. Like if you have a lot of text, you would put large. And then you can also change different themes. So this is the black theme, but you can also have a lighter color theme. Of course, your text would be darker if you chose this one. And then you can change your fonts. You can change your header to have the Esri logo or your company or city logo. You would upload the image here. And then you can choose what you would like people to share your story map with, Facebook, Twitter. All right, so that's the map journal. The next section is the map series. So has anyone ever made a map series or tabbed story map? All right, great. So this is one. I'll edit this. And with any story map, if you add ampersand edit to the URL, minus the cascade, right? For map journal and map series, if you add ampersand edit to the URL, it takes you immediately into edit mode. That's another tip. So this was another green infrastructure map series that I created. And what I like about the map series is that it has different layout options. So this is the side accordion. There's also the bulleted, which are the bullets at the top, and the tabbed, which I think the tabbed is the most used. But in this case, I had a lot of text, so I wanted to hide it with the accordion so that when people click on the tab, it expands. And there's lots of themes. So right now I'm using the green theme. And I think they just added the locate button where you can search in the map for your location. And again, left and right panel, small, medium, and large. This is neat. If you click on the display numbers, it shows the numbers on the side, but you don't have to have that. But in this case, my story map is called Six-Step Guide to Green Infrastructure. So I will have the numbers. And so those are the story maps. Previously, when Cascade didn't exist, we would mostly build with map journals. But there's story map inception, or story map, what do you call it?
Turducken?
Turducken.
Do you guys know what turducken is? Okay.
For people who don't, do you want to explain what turducken is? Because he had to explain to me.
Oh, turducken is a culinary abomination where you just cram a duck inside of a turkey, and you probably put some other kind of small bird inside of the chicken. Yeah, there's a chicken, gets rammed into the duck, which gets rammed into the turkey, and then you bake it all into this oblivion, and then you throw it away. You just throw it away. So it's a turducken. If you over-nest your story maps, occasionally you'll kind of start getting towards the turducken land, right? Sometimes it's really handy, I want to have this template of a story map, but I want to have this kind of form factor on the left, and so I'll embed my story map. Maybe I'll embed a simple swipe story map inside my story map. That's cool. Anytime you have just maps within maps within maps within maps, there's a little bit of a danger. Yeah. Have you guys seen the movie Inception, where every layer they go times, gets dilated times 8? Crazy stuff happens.
The gooey duck yesterday. So it's like a gooey duckin'.
Gosh, I'm just going to try to forget that I ever saw that gooey duck. And that they even exist in this world.
Did anyone eat one at the map gallery? How was it? It was good.
Is it good?
No, yes. There you go.
Jocelyn.
All right, so this is a tabbed map series that is turducken all the way. So the intro, I used a Cascade story map, which you'll see later, so I don't want to ruin the surprise. I won't talk about that. And then question 1, question 2, and question 3 are all map journals within the map series.
Do you guys see what happened there? So it's this story map wrapper, and then the first tab is a separate story map template called Cascade, and then the second tab is a map journal style story map. Sorry, Go ahead.
And I think this one has a good example of tabs, and I think it's question 2. So I wanted to show you the map journal, the map actions, because I think those are really effective. So let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this map shows the service by time of day for public transportation in Atlanta. And you can use map actions in your map journal so that people can click on the text to interact with the map.
That's a beautiful map, by the way.
Thank you.
Beautiful cartography.
So there's a lot of there's a lot of transit, a lot of frequency during the morning rush hour. The daytime is a little bit less, and then from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m., if I click on that text, you can see that the transit frequency decreases significantly. And so let me show you real quick how to do that. Theme, black and white. Okay. So go to a map. And you would go, let me change this back to the normal. Right, medium, and black. Okay. So you go to the edit settings and say you wanted to do something with this text. So you would highlight the text, and story map actions is now solidified. Before it was grayed out, so it only shows up when you highlight the text. And there's lots of things you can do. You can change what's happening in the map, the main stage action. You can even do it with a website or an image. It doesn't have to be with the map itself. You can locate an address or navigate to a certain section. So let's see what this one, change the main stage content. So we can change the location. So custom configuration, and say I'm interested in zooming into Africa. And save the map location and apply the story map action. And now, when I click on this, it zooms you to that section. So you can do this with, say you wanted to do the word range. Or I'll just type in a new word, Esri. And you want someone to click on Esri, and it takes you to a web page. So http, esri.com.
And as Jen goes, if you've got questions, just make a note of it, and we've got a 15-minute Q&A session at the end, and we'll try to get there, or at least find out for you.
Yes. All right, so you highlight the text, click on main stage action. I want it to go to a web page, so I'll paste the web page and configure. I want it to fill the whole screen. So I'll apply and save. Let's see. Oh, hey, there we go. So that's really fun to explore, get creative with this. And the last two things I'd like to show you about the map journal and the map series. This is the public transit story map. This is the map series tab. So it's a map accordion within a tab. So that's another nice looking turducken mapception.
Tabducken?
Tabducken, I like that.
I'm just going to stop.
And within each of these tabs, it calls to a website. So it's kind of difficult to do, but once you play around with it, you can see which inception styles work best. You kind of just see that this is working for us. So,
yeah. And with this map style, I should actually point out that a lot of people have used this as a presentation framework instead of PowerPoint. You know, if you're giving a presentation at, the town hall or something, or even within your job, instead of having to create a map in ArcMap and export it, or make a web map and then link out to it and kind of break that continuity of your presentation, a lot of folks will use map journals particularly as their PowerPoint replacement, especially if it's a map-heavy presentation. But I've also seen people's presentations that were map journals that used 0 maps, and it was just used to replace PowerPoint because they were familiar with it and they liked the layout, and it happened to work for them. So I thought that was kind of fun. Plus, it was web-based, and they didn't have to have a PowerPoint deck with them. They didn't have to worry if it was compatible with a Mac. It was just a URL, which, by the way, Esri can host. You can host your own, but by default, we'll host it for you.
all right. So if you have any questions, write them down, and we can go over it at the end.
So I'll talk about Cascade, just an introduction to what Cascade is and why it exists. Cascade is kind of the next step in the story maps tier of layout options, and it's more of like this I want to say blogging environment almost, where instead of this very kind of view-centric, here's a map, here's another map, here's another map, really it lets you create this long-form style of scrolly telling. Have you guys heard? I mean, I feel like we're just making up so many words today, but I didn't make up scrolly telling. So scrolly telling is this notion that people just want to scroll through content, and it's become more of the de facto communication methods for graphics within the newspaper industry, because they have found empirically that people just don't click on things. They will not interact generally. And they found that they were burying a lot of insight and information behind interaction because it was cool and it was new, and interaction is fun, right? But like any technology, you become more versed in it and you realize what your users do and what their needs are. And they found out, you know what, we're probably doing this interaction a little bit too heavy-handedly, and people are missing out on some important information. And they found out that this generation of people using the web, like including me, like to do this. This is my form of interaction. This is how I interact with something. You've got a story, tell me your story. Don't make me work to get the story, right? Also, there's risk that people are going to miss something, right? You don't have to create your map and just hope they notice something. You can present that to them in a narrative structure that unfolds as they do this. Right? So it's kind of nice. It's very simple, slightly tyrannical, but it's nice and easy for your users. And we call it Cascade because there are different form functions that kind of come in at different, parallax rates and fade in and fade out, or curtain in and curtain out, that sort of thing. So it's Story Maps Cascade. And I should say you can get to it from our Story Maps website, storymaps.arcgis.com. Here's our homepage, Story Maps. And you can browse cascades that other people have done. You can browse different story map types. So this is where I get a lot of my inspiration is from you, just seeing the beautiful work that you guys do. And in trying to support that, I learn a lot about what you're working on and what tips and tricks you've come up with yourselves. If you haven't read this Map Woman Cascade, it's just incredible, by the way. It was released right before this. And this is all standard Cascade functionality. It's this beautiful GIS comic style action story. So that's our gallery, a plug for the Story Maps gallery. And you can create your own at any time by going to the apps, learning more about them, and just saying, let's go for it, right? I'm going to create a story. But first I'll show you some stories that we've written that help describe what Cascade is. So what you're about to see is a cascade that shows you how to cascade. So Cascade, I found, was actually so versatile and easy to use that I didn't want to use the blog to write about, the new features of Cascade. I could just show it, right? That's so meta. I can just show you something. I don't have to tell you. I can say, this is it. So here's a cascade that shows you different aspects of Cascade. Some place that's probably a good place to start with cascades is understanding that it's comprised of sections, right? This is a big narrative section. And I can add this and introduce the concept. In this narrative section, I have a great big media element. It could be an image, it could be a video, it could be a web map, right? I'm not going to play this, but it's Carl Sagan giving an amazing speech. Here's an ArcGIS Online map. And these aren't just images, right? They're interactive. So this is within a narrative section, we call it. And then there's something that I think is a lot of fun, and it's called an immersive section. Now, an immersive section is different from a narrative section in that instead of just scrolling through things, when an immersive section comes into place, it locks into view. It's a full screen experience, locked into view. And as you scroll, the Cascade author has determined what appears here. So I've got these floating narrative panels. Here's Carl about to give an impassioned speech about our place in the galaxy. He uses the word billion a lot. Billions. You can have a full screen ArcGIS Online web map in your immersive section. You can even, as I scroll, navigate to different parts of your web map, right? So I'm not requiring somebody to click on something. I'm just scrolling, right? I can say, here's, County A, County B, County C, and I'm just doing this, right? I'll show you how to set something like that up. Those are called views within an immersive section. Oh, by the way, this map, as an aside, is the recruitment hometowns of Alabama football. Ed, for Ed. Okay, and then this is called a title section. So sometimes in your story you want to just stub in a little break, like a chapter in a book, and introduce a new topic, and you want to pivot in that way, and you want something that's kind of beefy enough that the reader sees that you're kind of changing tone or moving on to the next theme. And this is a title section, and it can have an image in it, and you populate it with text. You can also link to that, right, up in your bookmarks, which I'll show you how to do. And then back to another narrative section. And then finally, we roll up with the credits section. So if I've used imagery from the web, of course, as a good citizen of the internet, I'm going to link to it, I'm going to cite it, and I'm going to say whose image it was, if it wasn't mine. If I want them to explore my web map a little bit further or learn more about Alabama football, not sure, but I might add a link here, right? So credits. And I've seen people use credits actually pretty creatively. It doesn't necessarily have to be used for credits. It can be information about your organization, right? Links to other story maps that your organization has made. So don't think of this kind of rigidly as a credits section, but more of like a bookend to your story where they can reach out for more information. So those are credits, or sections, sorry. Transitions. So you saw when I was scrolling within an immersive section, it faded between some content. It navigated between content. Those are called transitions. I'll show you how to do those in a moment. When you add an immersive section, you click immersive, and then down at the bottom, it's kind of like a little film strip, right? Like this. Each little preview is a view, and you can set up a series of different views. It can be different images, it can be different videos, it can be different points in your map. And this little magic button here, which is defaulted to fade, if you click it, you can say, I want to do a slow fade for a little more drama. I want to swipe it vertically or horizontally, or I don't. I just want an abrupt transition to my next media item. And I'll show you what these look like because we're actually in a living, breathing cascade. So here's an immersive section, which is just locked in full screen. And I've got an image of a map. That's a nice pro tip there is you don't necessarily need to load the whole interactive web map. If you've got a map, you just want to take a screenshot of it and drop it in here. It's a lot more lightweight. You don't have to load all of it if you don't anticipate the user clicking on pop-ups and navigating on their own. So feel free to make an image of your map and use that image. So let's look at transitions. Here's image A, and I'm going to fade to image B. That's the default transition. It's kind of pleasing, right? It's nice. Sometimes you want it to fade a little bit slower. It's a gentler effect. These beautiful old hands from this farm field. Fade slow. And now there's a couple other options. Swipe. Now you might remember that we have a story map template itself called swipe. And a lot of times people think that we've embedded a swipe story map within a story map, but it's actually just a transition type. So you don't have to actually go create a swipe app and embed it. You can just have an image A and then an image B, but choose to swipe between the two. And it's kind of a nice reveal if you've got something in your presentation where you want to say, here it is here, and then you want perhaps a little bit of drama as you roll the curtain back and you show your second image. And third image. The cool thing about a swipe in Cascade is you can have 35 swipe images right in a row stacked next to each other. It's not A versus B. It's A to Z, right? And I went sideways, but you can also go vertically. So here's the reservoir before the great drought of the last 5 years in California, and here's that same reservoir after. So before and after, and I'm using a vertical swipe of 2 photographs. So here it is with no transition within an immersive section. Bang! So the emotional impact of that is more stark. It's kind of a bleak transition from one to the other. Use it sparingly, but sometimes you just want to boom, right? There's some power in the restraint of a no transition. So you'll notice something here. As I scroll, I've got multiple narrative images coming through. How did I do that? I just duplicated the same view over and over again, and I added a narrative for each view. I don't have to have this very big, long narrative panel that might actually invoke a scroll bar if you're on a small monitor, which would be a real bummer. So those are transitions. You can also have combinations within them, right? You can fade between A to B and then swipe to C and then vertical transition to D. So generally be kind of judicious about that. You don't want to have it just kind of feel all over the place. If you use one, try to stick with it. But if it works, break the rules. That's what they're for. Okay, so a little bit of advice on storytelling with your maps. How are we for time? How am I doing?
Okay.
Okay.
And set 11:15.
Yeah, tell me just to zip it if I'm going too long. So telling a story in a story map, one of the coolest parts about this is you're not just creating a map and then throwing it out into the world and hoping people understand it. And it also means that you don't have to create this very massive, complex legend that explains every aspect of your map, right? So there are strategies for presenting your map to an audience of readers in a way that they don't have to rely on this legend. I realize this is pretty distracting. The premise of this story is that it talks about the great hamster zombie apocalypse that happened a short while back. It kind of walks you through that process. And here's the map of the hamster zombie apocalypse. You guys get it, right? See, it's a map. You get it. Of course, right? Here's my map. You figure it out, right? No. I could also explain this with a really big legend, but the fact that I'm in a story map means I have an amazing opportunity to tell a story. So a legend is just a poor stand-in for you when you can't be there, right? So in your story maps, you be the legend. Let your narrative be the legend. Let the map itself do the storytelling, and don't rely on this, this key that people have to kind of dart their eyes over to try to decode, right? Throw the decoder ring away in your Cascade story maps and start presenting your content in a narrative manner. For example, here is the United States, and this is ground zero for that great hamster outbreak. I've got an image, and I'm fading to a second image. So I'm building up my map, and I'm narrating it as the reader scrolls, right? These are the locations of the outbreaks. They were military labs where the hamsters escaped. And this is the first week of the hamster apocalypse. It spread 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So now we see that we're looking at the locations of the hamster outbreaks, and then 3 weeks of progressive horror and terror. But mankind is resilient, and we fought back, and we were... Oh, let me give you a tip. So in this case, I've baked in a small legend here. So this is an option. So obviously, if you don't know by now, I'm not a big fan of legends. But if you really want a legend, go ahead and roll one into the narrative panel of your image, okay? Don't feel like you have to bake it into the map. And don't feel like you have to do everything in the legend. But if you want a legend, you can always add it as an image in your narrative panel. So they were spreading like crazy, but mankind was ready and we fought back. And we had zombie containment teams in place. And this is the location of those operatives, right? And they were helicoptered in and dropped into the hot zone, right? So this is the location of their origins, and they were helicoptered into the hot zone. This is Wave 1 containment team. Wave 1 was quickly obliterated, and Wave 2 was called in to contain the mess. And then ultimately, believe it or not, Wave 3 was needed to fully contain it and offer backup to Wave 2, which took some heavy tolls. And there you have it. So I've taken just a ridiculous, absurd, complicated map with lots of data and lots of implied ordering and time and lots of features. And instead of just lobbing it at our user, I've thought about what my map wanted to communicate, and I've revealed it progressively. And I've baked in the occasional legend elements into my narratives if I need to. I've, like Jen said, used text to key color in the paragraph to the geographic features here, which I'll show you how to do. I love this feature because I hate legends so much. I love that I can colorize my text and make a good legend. And everything's cool now. Hamsters and mankind are cool. We patched things up. So these are available at the ArcGIS blog. So there's a rundown. I didn't show all of them, of course, but there's a big batch of Cascade story maps that show you how to cascade. So let's build one.
Sure.
Do we have time?
Yeah.
What time is it? 10 to?
Yep. 15 minutes.
Oh, good. Okay. So I'll do this for about 10 minutes or so. Okay. So I'm going to build a really quick story map just to give you an impression of the editor and the builder and what it looks like and where to find things, that sort of thing. It's probably not going to be a very good story, of course, but I'll stub things in. So if you go to story maps, like I showed you before, you can go to apps and just create a story right there. I'm signed in, by the way, and if you're not signed in, it'll just ask you to sign in once you create a story. I'm going to choose Cascade, but there's lots of story map types to choose from. Favorite is Cascade. If I click that, it'll open a new blank story map. Oh, interesting. What's this tab, actually? I'll close that. So, by default, we've pre-populated this with 35 really majestic images that you can use if you're satisfied with the defaults, but I hope you're not. But we at least try to make the default choice something that's attractive. But you're not stuck with it. So let's write our story. Happiness. Mappiness, good idea. Happiness maps. So this is the title and my subtitle. The subtitle is optional. I'm not stuck with having to come up with a subtitle. You currently have to have a name though, but a lot of people have been asking for the ability to not give this story map a name, which I think is interesting. But it just shows that people are using this in novel ways, and we really want to support that. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. And now it's writing back this story map to my ArcGIS Online account, and it'll be available to me, you know, at my work computer, at my home computer, if I'm in Beijing, anywhere I go. I've hit save, and it said, okay, you're good, you've saved it. This is the sharing panel. Right now this is private, so only I'm seeing it, which is nice because I'm still editing this thing and building it. I can share it within my organization, so Jen can see it, but you guys can't. If she wants to give me some feedback, like, hey John, you spelled maps wrong. Thanks Jen, I updated it. I hit save. And then when it's all ready to roll, I can just hit this globe and share it publicly. This is a preview button. So at any time in my story, I can always hit this and it'll pop out a new tab and show me exactly what I've made so far, which is really nice. The building experience is fully what you see is what you get. It's fully embedded. There's no, or we tried to reduce as much as possible this notion of modal pop-up windows and then hitting accept and then seeing it, right? We want you to get that immediate feedback of your story as you build it. This is the cover section. As I scrolled, oh, you know, let's change this because we just don't like defaults. We're not satisfied with defaults. I can drop an image right here on the screen if I've got one on my desktop that I like, or I can browse for one. I can search Flickr for one that's freely available to me. My Google Plus library of images is available to me. I can link to one if it's hosted, like you do kind of in previous story map templates. You had to link to a hosted image somewhere, a JPEG that's on a blog or a website somewhere. But here's Unsplash. Unsplash is this great free service that's available to folks. A beautiful vetted photography that's available for public use. Royalty free. Be a good citizen and try to cite the name of the photographer and the name of the image and perhaps link to it in the credits section, of course. But it's just great. Now, I happen to know that Norway voted itself as the most happy country in the most recent UN Happiness Index. So I'm going to search for Norway. Get a big cover photo of Norway. So right now I'm hitting the Unsplash service, and I get these great options. I mean, it's just beautiful. I like this one. I don't know why they'd be so happy with all that snow that they have to drive through and plow, but that's okay. It makes us strong. I'll hit save. And this is my cover. As I scroll down, it says, okay, well, now what, John? Right? So, did you see what I did there? Click plus. I'm just adding content as I go. I'm going to add some text. This is a story map. Mrs. Beach would hate this. In book reports, never say this is a book report about. This is a story map about happiness. Maps. Okay. Now a pro tip is to try to inject text sections between full media images. If you've overstacked media too much, it can be a little bit heavy feeling. Now I'm going to add another, so I can add as many lines as I want. This is a second line. Okay. Now, if I want to create a list that's kind of tight, I hit Shift. This is a secret. Shift, Enter. This did not jump so far down. Shift, Enter. Nor this. Okay. Now, that's not Cascade specifically. Any word editor will do that pretty much. Shift, Enter just jumps you down one line. Like if you're in Word and it's double spaced and you're always wrestling with that, or you're drafting an email and it jumps too far when you hit return, hit shift return. It'll jump you down nice and tight. So you can use that in your story maps too. Now I'm going to add another section. This is going to be an immersive section. So see this button here? Immersive. Boom. And it says, okay, get ready to live. And it jumps me down to this big full screen interface and asks me what I want to add. And I'm going to add, hey, by the way, did you notice in this panel over here that it's kind of showing me a film strip of my story? That's cool. So I've got a WYSIWYG, but I've also got a schematic view of my story over here to give me context for where I am in my narrative. So let's add media. I'm going to let's see. I've got 3 maps that I baked. I'm going to add them. Like this. That's cool, right? I didn't have to browse for each one individually. I just dragged it right over. And it's grayed out because I haven't used it yet in my story. So let's add one. So here is a map of happiness index data. Blue is pretty happy. Yellow is like medium happy, and red, they didn't consider themselves to be very happy in the survey. And this is an immersive section. And an immersive section is made up of views which kind of transition between each other. Let me know if I'm good on time or if I should hurry up. Okay, so I'm going to add another one. So right here, I'm going to add another section. And this could be any media, but I'm going to add a second map of isolating only the happy countries. And I'm going to add a third map where I show the sad countries. Okay? So this is always a live preview. I don't have any narrative in here yet, but I can. But it's ready for me. And did you notice the fade transition between these? That's the default transition. If you're feeling dangerous, you can click this transition type and say, you know, I want to swipe vertically. Swipe vertically. And the editor is live. It shows me an exact example of what I'm going to see in my story. Okay. Happiness. There's 2 P's in happiness. Spell check, thank you. Mega happy. Those Nordic countries are just always really satisfied with themselves. Life is good. Okay. Less happy. Sub-Saharan Africa rates themselves quite poor on surveys of happiness in that UN report. Okay, so I've come to the end of my immersive section. But look what I just did. I just selected that text and a menu popped up. I didn't select it and have to go into a configuration item anywhere. It's right there. I can make this a hyperlink to the report itself. I can say, you know what? Let's embed a legend in the text here, right? So people don't have to have a legend, a key of less happy, medium happy, more happy. Did you see that? You didn't see that. Okay, and I come to the end of the section. And I add, let's see, a narrative section where I can tell my story through text again. Let's consider some of the things that make us happy. Now, there are 6 explainers to the happiness index. So the UN went through and said, these guys are this happy, but given what we know about the country, can we reverse engineer this a bit and see, well, you know, these countries are rich and these countries are poor. Does that have anything to do with it? So they came up with 6 key explainers. So I'm going to introduce that concept by adding a title. So I clicked plus. Now there's a little title here. Explainers. And by default, it's this kind of nice hillshade image, but I can change that to something else. In my case, I just want it to be a black bar. And if I'm not satisfied with the black text with a semi-transparent white background and this black background image, I can say, you know what, I'm going to take a look and make this white text. Right? So all of this editing capability is in line. And then I'm going to add text thereafter. So there's wealth, trust, expectations of health, someone to lean on in times of trouble, your sense of personal freedom, and how much you give to charity. And in this, I would like to explore a map about this that I've made in ArcGIS Online. So now I'm going to create another immersive section. And instead of a map image, I can actually browse my content in ArcGIS Online, believe it or not, which is really cool. And I'm going to pull in this map that I've made of the World Happiness Report. It might take a moment to load. Know any good jokes? Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So that was just loading behind the scenes, doing its own thing. I could have, added a description here, given it a title here. So, happiness drivers.